Hi everyone, today I want to talk about Diablo 4 in general. I guess most of you are aware that Diablo 4 is not really in the greatest state right now. People are quitting, people are upset, there's tons of negative comments, tons of negative content out there. And being a Diablo content creator myself, obviously I can notice that and I understand where a lot of these people are coming from. Now, I don't really mean to say that everything about Diablo 4 is bad, as a lot of the haters do. I think Diablo 4 has a lot of really good things to offer, but obviously there are problems with the game, and I figured I could take some time to talk about those things and give some thoughts, some suggestions of what I would like to see in the near future, what the game really needs to make it a better experience for those playing it. So I have four main topics here. I'm talking about UI and quality of life, I'm talking about content, I'm talking about itemization, and about seasonal themes. So this is what I will go through in this video, and I will just give my points of view here. If you expect me to just like trash everything and say Diablo 4 bad, go uninstall now, that is not going to happen. But I want to be constructive, I want to see the game succeed basically, because I like it overall. But yeah, there are definitely things that Blizzard has done wrong and that needs changes. Let's go with quality of life first. So we have Diablo 4 and it was developed for two platforms at the same time, PC and console, and it shows. So number one is the UI. We have so many like console features, so many concessions made to the console version for PC players that it's really outrageous. We have no search function in the stash. We have these like clunky large interface, buttons and all that stuff. For example, you can't even see like more than like 6 people or something on your friend list at a time. You have to scroll through so many people to see them. So there's definitely a lot of issues with people being used to certain standards when they play a PC game that obviously it might work well for console, but it just doesn't work well for PC. So I think number one that we need to see in the midterm, I guess, is that the UI on PC and console gets split into two separate versions where you just have typical quality of life features for a PC game. Kind of in the same vein is the topic of Stashspace. So this has been hotly debated, and lately we have learned from the developers that they actually have a technical limitation when they cannot give us more stash space than they currently have, which is already ludicrous on its own, I think. And that is definitely something that needs to improve. I'm actually really flabbergasted by the fact that this was not a design choice and this was actually a technical limitation and something that is definitely in need of change, in my opinion. I mean, how could they not have seen that coming, that people want or need more stash space than what we have in the game right now? I mean, I can understand that if you play to like level 50, 60 or something like that, yeah, the current stash space is fine for like one build on one character. But then we have lots of aspects that you need to save in your stash. Maybe you want to play a different build later on, maybe you want to even play a second character. And it feels like this current design with the stash and how you have to save aspects just really disincentivizes you from trying to experiment, from trying to play the game more, really. Like, when I make a new character, basically the only way to do that is I delete basically everything that's in my stash and just completely empty it, like delete all the GG items I've gathered, all the aspects, and then, just never look back. Just like don't play my previous character again. This is basically how it goes in case I want to make a second or third or whatever character, because there's simply so little stash space. And this also brings me to the topic of codex powers and the occultist. So right now we have the Codex of Power, which is, in my opinion, a relatively decent tool. It's useful to get a character started, but not all of the powers are in there, and also they're always the minimum value, which is fine for something that's kind of like freely given to you. But on the other hand, I think the system could be massively expanded to the point where we don't have to use like half of our very little stash space to just collect aspects. Basically, this is what I do at least. I just have like literally 2 or 3 tabs dedicated to just legendary items that I will maybe or maybe not extract at a later time in case I want to find, want to imprint a new upgrade or want to switch my build. And I think this is like a really bad system. there's simply so much like leftover space that I cannot use because of those aspects, because I never know when I find an upgrade. I never know when I want to experiment with something, or make some other character, make some other build. And I need to have those aspects ready, because if I do a respec and then it turns out I don't have the items needed, well, what am I even doing? So I'm obviously not going to go back and farm like a new aspect that may or may not drop like 10 hours later. So I think there could definitely be some improvements with this whole codex system. Maybe, for example, your occultist could store our aspects, or maybe we could even have every single legendary aspect in the game in the Codex of Power, for example, and we can maybe upgrade them during a season as we find new aspects, and we can just like throw them in there to the occultist, and that raises the minimum value that it can imprint, or something like that. I think this would allow us to just like not dedicate all of our stash space to aspects, and instead actually put items in there that we want to save. Respecking, and this is yet another problem here, where it's just so cumbersome, so much trouble to try to respec a character. Yeah, we have the refund all skills option on the skill tree, but that is like really redundant, because many builds actually have a lot of overlap in their skill points, and you're either wasting gold or you're wasting time even trying to use that, instead of just like reassigning like a few points on the skill tree, and then you have like a new setup. So I think this is actually kind of unnecessary. And on the other hand, we have the Paragon system, where you have 225 points to spend, and all you can do is like left click or right click them all one by one. We don't have the option to like unspec an entire Paragon board at once. We don't have the option to like move Paragons or the Paragon boards around and like rotate them after they have been attached. I think there's like a lot of like quality of life missing, and it just leads to frustration when you're trying to make your setup, and that doesn't really have to be that way, I think. At the very least, I think we should have some kind of like respec all, or like refund all function in the Paragons, or at the very least board by board. I think that would make even more sense, to where we don't have to press the right click like 200 different times just to make a new setup if you want to change something around. And then there are more general topics with the user interface that are just really in a bad state. Number one is that most tooltips are, or like many tooltips at least, are just straight up wrong. They don't really show you the right damage values on your skills. A lot of like stats are like not showing their correct behavior. For example, like additive damage versus multiplicative damage. It is really confusing to people that don't understand the game on like a very, very deep level. Like understanding what is actually a good stat, what is actually a good choice for the build. And without like some in-depth testing, you cannot really figure it out. It's only for those people that, have tried these things, that have tested the mechanics, that actually understand like what is bugged, what is correct, what does a certain stat actually do, does it actually apply to a certain thing. And I think there's just like a massive lack of clarity in those tooltips, both in the character details, in the skill tooltips, in passives in some cases. I see that Blizzard is trying to solve that a little bit, but we are way off from being in a good state there as well. And this is obviously really important in a game that is designed to be about choices, about, experimentation, about, making your own build and all that stuff. If people cannot understand what actually works and how, that is all just not really useful. Then we have Renown. This is another topic related to quality of life, I would say, where it seems like a lot of people are just unhappy with how Renown works. Personally, I'm actually a big Renown enjoyer. I actually like leveling characters up in the open world. I like to just play in the open world in general, which I'll get to in a second. And Renown is like the one time when I can do that, basically, without really feeling bad about losing efficiency. But I understand that a lot of people are also upset that they have to do Renown grind again. They just want to blast. And Blizzard has already done a few steps to just make it easier, with like the altars being shared, the map being shared, dungeons and quests have been buffed. So in general, Season 1 was already way faster than on launch, but I think there could be more things done here. I think that, yeah, maybe Renown should just be passively acquired from some sources, or maybe it could just be like sticking around forever, so you don't have to go and do all those side quests again another time and another time every single season, and maybe give players some other more exciting stuff to level up in the early game in the season. So that would probably help. And I think with make a lot of players very happy. Now let's talk about content and the lack thereof in this game. So the main content that we do right now is Nightmare Dungeons that you can see here right now. This is like the one shining endgame activity that is like fairly well thought out, I guess, and the only thing that you really want to do in this game right now. So it really reminds of Diablo 3 Greater Rifts, where like 99% of the time this is the one thing you do because it's, you know, has a scaling difficulty, it has a scaling rewards, it actually gives you important stuff that you need for your progression, and almost everything else in Diablo 4 right now is just like trivial, basically. Whispers, even Helltide, like all the early game progression, outdoor stuff, outdoor events, like the whole open world is basically useless and was made more useless in the recent patches. They buffed Nightmare Dungeons, they buffed XP in Nightmare Dungeons, they buffed density in Nightmare Dungeons, you get your glyph levels there that you need for a character, and well, the open world and all the other activities just don't have anything to offer. There used to be Helltide as like a kind of like semi-mandatory activity to get Forgotten Souls, but even those you get now for free just by playing the game and doing Nightmare Dungeons and salvaging your items. So the reason to run Helltides has also severely diminished. And I don't really understand why that happened. I think that Helltide was in a really good spot previously. There was like a reason to go there, to farm Forgotten Souls, to farm Fiend Roses, which, okay, you still have to do now, but very, very little. And in general, you're just like kind of stuck in those Nightmare Dungeons. You also teleport to Nightmare Dungeons now, so you don't even interact with the open world. And I think this is, at the very least, a massive bummer. I think that the open world should be made more exciting. There should be more cool stuff. There should be a reason to go out there and do some whispers and do some Helltides. And, well, outside of that, we also just need more content. So I think there could be like some, you know, specific rewards. There could be maybe XP buffs to those activities so that I can kind of choose, you know, do I want to run Nightmare Dungeons? Do I want to run Whispers? Do I want to go Helltide? And do I maybe want to do something else? You know, let's just take the Season 1 theme as an example. The Millennium Tunnels, they're kind of like some little extra side content. And, you know, a little bit like on the level of Helltides. I want to see more systems like Helltide. I think Helltide is yeah, one of the most exciting things that Diablo 4 has right now. It's just fun, but on the other hand, it's pretty useless, to be honest. You get some elixirs, okay, cool. You can maybe try to get, you know, a few legendaries there, maybe like for a specific slot, but it's not really that great at delivering the items that you're trying to target farm. So there needs to be some buffs, and there needs to be better balancing between the existing endgame activities, and most importantly, we also need more new stuff. For example, something that is like really untouched right now is just like the entire progression from like around level 80, let's say, to level 100. Then at level 100, yeah, you can do some Nightmare Dungeon pushing, you can do tier 100, you can do Uber Lilith, but that is like so far out of reach for most players that it's effectively not a target. So people are just getting kind of bored at some point at around that level 80 range or so, because your build is online. You have your most important legendary items, maybe even uniques. You have all the stuff you need from your paragons, besides just like more numbers. And you have your glyphs online that you need. You have your legendary paragon nodes, etc. So the build is kind of done at around that level in most cases, and nothing really happens anymore. And I think there needs to be more stuff in that range from 80 to 100, where yeah, we just have something to look forward to. Something along the lines of like a capstone dungeon. I think that the progression 1 to 50 is like, you know, its own little thing. And then we have, you know, 50 to 70, you have the first capstone dungeon, and then you're working towards the next capstone dungeon. And overcoming those challenges and kind of like, you know, reaching those milestones actually feels really good, at least to me. And I think most people will agree here. It feels nice to beat that capstone boss and go to the next world tier and start getting those sacred items, and then you beat Elias, and then you go to world tier 4 and you start getting ancestral items. There's like this huge jump in power, maybe even too much of a jump in power, because I think this kind of like took away from potentially adding more, you know, item tiers to the game, or at least more stat tiers. But okay, this is what we got now. But I think that after you have kind of like settled in Torment difficulty and you have found your first batch of decent ancestral gear, you're just like not really progressing much anymore, besides trying to find yeah, a bit better items than he had previously. And, you know, the huge power spike kind of slows down, and then it's just like, you know, grinding those paragons. And I think that paragons already offers a relatively interesting like late game progression where, you know, every so often you get a bit of a power spike, you get a bit of an increase, and you kind of slowly min-max your character. I really like the paragon system, but it's not enough on its own to really carry the endgame progression and make it feel exciting all the way through. So what we need is yeah, something more on the lines of capstone dungeons, maybe some, you know, mega dungeons, maybe some bosses, you know, some milestones where like maybe every 5 levels or so, like, you know, 80, 85, 90, and 95, even at 100, there would be maybe some kind of milestone you can reach, some kind of challenge that you can overcome, depending on how strong your build is, maybe earlier or later. But, you know, something to look forward to and to work towards. That is not just an insane grind from, you know, level 80 to 100 in one go, without anything in between. I think that the early and mid-game experience up to like, yeah, level 75, level 80 or so is already in a fairly good spot. It feels nice to progress and find loot and, you know, make your character stronger, make your setup, complete your build, etc. But then comes really this down phase where people just kind of stop playing because they're getting bored. And I can totally understand why. Now, I don't want to leave out post-level 100 content in this video entirely, but fixing up the mid-game experience, especially like, you know, from level 80 onwards up to level 100, I think that would be the most important step right now for Blizzard to do. And then, you know, maybe over time they're going to start adding more end-game content, more stuff like Uber bosses, more stuff like, you know, like maybe even a World Tier 5 or so, where you have like post-level 100 content that is actually exciting. And not just like nightmare dungeons that are like the only useful thing to grind. Maybe a, you know, World Tier 5 could also include something like, you know, monster levels are minimum level 125, you know, everywhere, even in the open world. That would just make it more exciting. That would give, you know, players some kind of like, you know, more endgame challenge instead of just like blasting through everything against low level monsters that don't do anything against you. And well, the rewards are also just feeling kind of underwhelming right now when you are doing open world content. So I think World Tier 5 could solve that, and more endgame challenges, especially coming from, you know, seasonal themes that are being made permanent, or at least parts of those. That could be the solution here in the long run. But I think in a short term, we need, yeah, definitely a big focus on this 80 to 100 experience first and foremost. And kind of related to this topic is also the next big topic that I have for this video, which is itemization. I think that, yeah, in general, a lot of people are also unhappy with how items work in this game, especially the fact that, number one, we have no loot filters that are relatively standard these days in ARPGs, and number two, that there is simply also not really so much exciting stuff to look forward to. We have item drops, and they can be a certain item power, they can, you know, roll in a few stats that are more or less useful to you, and then you have the option to replace one stat of them at your occultist. And the thing is that everyone who has ever used the occultist for rerolling will understand that this can be incredibly frustrating because you have this insane exponential gold cost, which is clearly intended as a gold sink in this game, which, well, I generally agree with. The main problem that I see though is that you quite likely actually run into a situation where you find an item that could have potential and then you go reroll it and you just get nothing. And on the other hand, we have just so many item drops that you actually have to sift through like, you know, 1,000 items or something later to even try to find such an item that you may want to roll, that you may want, you know, to consider an upgrade. And it just feels really bad. Like every single dungeon that I do right now, I just fill up my entire inventory with ancestral items and then I have to go through all of them one by one. I don't have the option to just tell the game, okay, I just want to have, you know, an item power 800 plus weapon that has crit damage and vulnerable on it. And, you know, just show me that and nothing else. Like, why do I have to look at like 1,000 different ones just to find that one item that I may be looking for? Like, for me, this is not even such a big problem personally. Like, I'm very good, I'm very fast at sorting out my loot. I do this in like 10 seconds after a run, but I'm 100% sure that most people are much slower than that, and it just feels more frustrating and exhausting than anything for them. I think something like loot filters would be a massive improvement to the game, where we can just like, highlight certain items that have a thing that we're looking for. Or at the very least, we could also just like reduce the amount of loot that drops. I think it wouldn't be so bad if just less loot drops, but it feels like there's just so much stuff. And every run I fill up my inventory, and I think this is just like, I have to go out of my way too much to get loot, in my opinion. I think if loot was generally better, like, more often, well rolled, and there was like less of it, it would feel a lot more exciting to actually find an item, to actually, look at the item and see if it has something that I want. But right now there is simply so many filler stats in the game. There's like thorns and slow duration reduction and, stuff like crowd control duration. And there's like so many little stats on items that just don't really do anything, that you never want to have on your build. Let's also take, for example, chess pieces as an example that can roll like offensive stats that do nearly nothing for your build, and then it can roll defensive stats that basically make you immortal. So I know what I will choose. So, and it's just like, why? Like, why do these stats even exist on these slots? Like, why can they not just be like clearly dedicated to defense, for example, and then other items just, more clearly are dedicated to like offense and utility stats and these kind of things? I feel like there's simply like so much stuff that I would never want to have on my build, and most builds just use kind of the same stats anyway, that it's just very difficult to actually find an item that I would consider good. And I also think that the lack of crafting in this game is pretty obvious as well. So we have the occultist rerolling, and that's literally it for like the extent of how we can change our items, if you're not talking about like the imprinting and stuff. And I think this is just way too little. I think there could be a massive improvement made here with maybe allowing the occultist to roll specific stats. Maybe you can find certain materials that you can use for, that purpose, so you can like customize your item a little bit easier and kind of solve that occultist problem. And in general, I think that the game just needs more crafting options. So why can't we just take like a base item, like a white or blue item, or like a yellow item that has maybe one or two of the stats that we really want, and then we change it further? Like, why can't we like craft it up from the ground? For example, this would be a really good way to make like the endgame chase and the endgame progression feel a lot more interesting if we had like more ways to actually customize our items, more ways to craft our items, maybe after, grinding up enough materials over time, going all the way to like level 80, 90 or so. Maybe I would have like, I don't know, a few hundred, attempts of crafting an item or something. And now I can go and, maybe I can force a certain stat on an item, or I can remove one stat, replace it with another. Or you can just like take a blue item and just start adding stats to it. These kind of things, they're just all missing from Diablo 4 right now. And those are just the basics. Like, there could be way more crazy stuff that could be implemented here, I think, with, for example, a corruption-like system, where maybe you have a chance to massively improve an item with like a very special effect, or accidentally destroy it. So, there could be like a system like that, which would also kind of help with all these like duplicate items that you find in the end game, because sometimes you just find the same stuff and you don't have any need for it, even though it's good. So, destroying your items and kind of like refreshing the economy that way would be a very interesting feature as well, I think. So either way, I think these are just like some examples that I'm trying to throw out here that could maybe point devs in the right direction. I think we need a lot more stuff to do with our loot. We need a lot more like, exciting stats that we may be able to craft on your items in the late game. This could be even like post level 100 content where, maybe we unlock new stats that, are just really cool and exciting and just really take your build to the next level. And again, this gives us, some chase, this gives us some goal to work towards, similar to what I just described earlier in the content part, where, every few levels there needs to be some maybe new milestone, something new to find, something new to do that gives us like maybe some like permanent bonus or so. And on top of this, a better item chase where, we have the option to make some really, really cool endgame items and really want to min-max our character. Right now, there's just no point in doing that. And now comes my last point, the seasonal theme. So I think that the season 1 theme in Diablo 4 is quite lackluster, to be honest. Like, I think a lot of people enjoy the power that the hearts bring, okay, but if you're talking about the theme itself and how it impacts the game, it is quite minimal. Now, I understand that, you know, it was developed alongside the base game. There was a lot of other stuff to focus on. Yeah, I kind of get that. But in the end, I felt like with the little effort that seemingly was put into the season theme at least, there could have been more done. For example, these Millennium Tunnels, I feel like they are simply so irrelevant. There's like not really much of a reason to go there. Now they buff these drop rates of Wrathful Invokers, so yeah, if you really need that Barber Heart, you can go there, farm it a few times. And that's basically the extent of the interaction I have done with the season theme. You have those elites that pop up, but they're not really anything special, they're not really a challenge. I think this is kind of like a missed opportunity here of, for example, making those Millennium enemies like, you know, 10 times stronger, 10 times more HP, you know, make them some kind of like mini boss, a little bit like half a butcher or something like that, basically. Something of a challenge where it's not just yet another elite that is just two-shot with your build and that's it. I think they are just way too boring because they're way too easy. And especially given how powerful of a reward they offer, it's basically just like free power creep that we get here with those hearts that just like make everything a lot stronger. And that also brings me to the other point of the season theme, which is the power creep that comes with the season theme. Right now there's a rather large gap between Eternal Realm and Seasonal Realm in terms of how builds work, how strong builds are. And I think this is quite too much in terms of like this gap existing. I understand that Blizzard wants to, you know, push people towards seasonal play, but first of all, not everyone enjoys seasonal resets. You know, second of all, not everyone has time for seasonal resets. And I think it just feels quite bad for people actually playing on Eternal that, you know, want to progress their previous character, especially with the very little time that we had since launch until Season 1, where people were just not done, basically, right? And now they're kind of like, you know, everything is focused on seasonal content, on the hearts, and this is like the cool, exciting new stuff. And in 2 months from now, it will all be deleted from the game. Now, it feels kind of strange that there was like so much effort put into those hearts with 32 new, basically legendary effects, and then they're all just gonna get deleted again very soon. I think it's not too unlikely they're gonna see some of those hearts making a comeback as maybe a legendary item, or maybe even a unique item, or maybe in the far future even like a set for like the more powerful ones. But yeah, the fact remains that personally, at least, I'm not a fan at all of like temporary content, and especially this like temporary like power spike. And I think that especially with the game being kind of bare right now in the end game, with so many people complaining about not enough stuff to do, and even me like just laying out that we need more end game content and such things, and more exciting stuff to work towards, it feels very strange that developers have actually decided to make a season theme for season 1 of the game, for like the, you know, the first big update kind of, that is actually not going to stick around. I think what the game needs is, you know, seasonal themes that are big, impactful, exciting, and actually have the potential to stay in the game permanently. Maybe on a smaller scale, but, you know, just expanding on the game is like the #1 priority in my opinion. And, you know, Blizzard just going out there and saying, season 1 is not going to stick around anyway, guys. Yeah, that seems like a really, really strange choice to me. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm quite glad that season 1 is not sticking around. As I said, it's not really a great theme, so maybe this is why they said that, and they're developing something, you know, way bigger, way more exciting right now. I at least assume so, because now they also have more time to focus on those seasonal updates instead of, you know, the game itself and the season theme at the same time. So, you know, there's obviously like more room for bigger season themes now. But the fact remains that, yeah, I think Blizzard should really focus on making those large themes that, you know, really bring something new to the game permanently. And another problem that we have with the current theme is that, for example, the Barber Heart is just like so dominant, so, you know, everywhere basically. Almost every single build wants to run the Barber Heart, and it kind of like equalizes builds a lot. It kind of makes most builds feel exactly the same. And yeah, myself, I'm actually kind of actively trying to avoid the Barber Heart because of just how bland it feels. If you play like multiple different builds, it just, you know, it feels like almost like a cheat code. And I think that once this power creep from the season theme like runs out after the end of the season, a lot of people will get like a really bad awakening of, you know, understanding how bad their build actually was if they don't run the Barber. And they're gonna be kind of like used to this power creep of the season, to this like really high, like easy, like blast mode kind of game that is actually not what Diablo 4 was like before Season 1. And maybe will not be again afterwards as well. So I don't know what exactly is gonna happen, if these like seasonal temporary power creep effects are gonna be like a regular thing now, or if this was just like a one-time thing for now. Maybe Blizzard is experimenting a little bit. But at least personally, I'm quite unhappy that we see these temporary effects similar to D3. Now, I think that the D3 seasons have been very successful lately. I also had a lot of fun playing them. But the fact that every single season we get like something really cool and then it leaves again, yeah, I don't really like that. In any case, that's my 2 cents about the current state of the game. I think that, yeah, in general, a lot of people are happy or at least content with Diablo 4. But also we can see that especially like the more engaged audience is also very dissatisfied with how things are going. And I can see that developers also making lots of effort to try to listen to feedback. They have implemented a lot of like feedback that was asked for in the recent patches. And generally the game is moving in the right direction, I think. It may have not started in a really good spot, but I think that most of the patches, at least, most of the changes in each of those patches are actually good. And this is really one of the things that makes me optimistic about Diablo 4, where, yeah, I really feel like, Blizzard is trying to have these campfire chats. They, they show their faces, they talk to us about what they're planning to do and why and what are the problems. And I think this is one thing that Blizzard is doing really well right now, actually. Regardless of the backlash, regardless of the haters and, people saying the game is dead and all that stuff, I think that Blizzard actually doing a relatively good job at improving the game from where it started. And I'm quite optimistic and excited to see what is coming next. I simply wanted to point out what are like the biggest pain points, I guess, with Diablo 4 right now, with things that I hear from my community, from my YouTube comments, on Twitch chat, etc. Just, yeah, like trying to give some input of mine, maybe some ideas. And I'm sure that also Blizzard is well aware of most of these topics already, but maybe unsure how to prioritize them. And we are probably seeing some of those points that I just mentioned already in the next updates in Season 2, in Season 3, etc. We already have a few things that are promised for these seasons that are making our life easier, that are making the game more exciting. And, well, I'm very much looking forward to those as well. And that's it for this video here. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if there's something I really missed, something else that you don't really agree with at all, or maybe I was completely wrong on one thing. I would just be excited to hear more about this, and let's see what Blizzard will do in the long run. So that's it for me. Hope you like this, and see you guys next time.